This is a quick guide for the Return to Karazhan achievement in World of Warcraft, which requires killing Viz'aduum the Watcher in the mythic-only Return to Karazhan dungeon. Obviously, you'll need to kill all of the bosses prior to Viz'aduum to get this achievement, so this guide will be taking you through each encounter. Please note that all of the points in this guide are from a ranged DPS perspective. The first boss fight is the Opera event, which players who have completed the original Karazhan raid from the Burning Crusade should remember. This time, however, they've added 3 new musical-related boss fights which rotate weekly. The first possible encounter is Wicket, based on Wicked. The 2 witch bosses share health and will spawn purple defy gravity pools on the ground. When Galandre begins casting Magic Magnificent, run through a puddle and get flicked up in the air to avoid the damage. The second possible encounter is Westfall Story, based on West Side Story. This is a 3-phase fight which basically consists of ad management and avoiding AoE damage. The big move to watch out for is Mugria's Wash Away ability, which works the same as the waves on Sartharion in the Obsidian Sanctum. Simply move into the gaps to avoid large amounts of damage. The final possible encounter, and the one shown here, is Beautiful Beast, based on Beauty and the Beast. This is a fight with 4 animated household appliances and is fairly easy. Once you get one of the mobs down, the rest of their health will regenerate, so don't bother AoEing here and focus one down at a time. Wowhead recommends the kill order of Bablet, Luminor, Mrs. Cauldrons, and finally Coggleston. The kill order isn't vital, however Coggleston will be immune until the other 3 are dead. Bablet is recommended as the first target due to targeting random players and chasing them around with severe dusting. The targeted player should run away, with the rest of the DPS killing it down. Should you be hit, you'll take around 300,000 damage and be bound to the spot for 4 seconds. Luminor will cast Burning Blaze on random players, which will leave a fire patch on the floor. This can be cleared by a player affected by the Drench debuff from Mrs. Cauldrons. Mrs. Cauldrons will cast Leftovers approximately every 18 seconds, which will deal around 500,000 damage to all players within 10 yards and knock them back. This can be interrupted, however, so make sure you do to avoid unnecessarily lengthening the fight. Finally, Coggleston will activate and will mostly affect the tank. Just nuke it down and proceed to the next boss. The second boss in Return to Karazhan is the Maiden of Virtue, and as with the original raid, she is an optional boss. Sacred Ground is the first important ability to watch out for, which will spawn an expanding puddle of light under a player once the cast goes off. As you can see here, I popped the first puddle outside the room purely to give us more room later, but for the second puddle you want to pop on the edge of the room for mass repentance later in the fight. Maiden will cast Holy Shock fairly regularly, which you'll want to interrupt as this will do around 1.5 million damage to your tank and stacks. When Maiden begins to cast Mass Repentance, run into the puddle left by Sacred Ground to gain a damage dealing debuff. This will pull you out of the stun so you can focus on bursting her Holy Bulwark shield down before Holy Wrath goes off. Once the shield is down, Holy Wrath will be interruptible, and you want to be doing this as quickly as possible, otherwise everyone will take 2.4 million damage and 100% increased damage for the rest of the fight. Rinse and repeat to get her down before heading to the banquet hall. Morose is the third boss, and is another familiar face from the Burning Crusade raid. This time, however, the ads are immune to normal CCs, so you'll need to pick up the ghost traps to control them. There are 2 in the banquet hall, as well as 2 in the grand ballroom. Please note that throwing the traps will pull the boss and the ads, so make sure everyone is ready before you do so. The alternative strategy to CCing is to zerg them down in a flurry of AoE like we've done here. There will be a lot of damage going out, as well as tons more stuff to avoid, so you should only be doing this when you're confident with the fight. Once the ads are down, it's time to focus on Morose himself. He will vanish every 20 seconds and garrot a random player, dealing moderate damage and applying a dot. This dot stacks as well, so it acts as a soft enrage. Make sure you get Morose down before the stacks get too high. This is a fairly easy fight, and if anything is to go wrong it will be with the ads at the start. Once you've got Morose alone, you should get him down pretty quickly. Make sure you also pick up the keys dropped on the ground once he dies before moving on. Boss number 4 is yet another familiar face, although looking a bit more impressive this time round. Ataman the Huntsman and his steed Midnight make their return, along with a brand new mount. If for some reason you're wanting to progress through Kara as quickly as possible, you can skip Ataman as he is an optional boss. As you can see here, we went with a let's pull everything in one go strategy, which isn't recommended if your tank and healer aren't up to it. However, this will make it extremely quick and far more fun. The first ability of note is Intangible Presence, which applies a debuff to every player, though only one debuff is the true debuff. Players will know they've got it if they appear to have a ghostly presence on their character model. They should be the only one to be dispelled, as dispelling the wrong player will deal large amounts of damage to the party. Mezair is the next ability to watch out for, and it appears as a large conal fire patch on the ground. Simply move out of this to avoid taking a large amount of damage. Shared Suffering is the next move to pay attention to, and will require the group stacking up on the tank to split the damage. The move deals around 5 million damage, so it's essential to have at least a few players stack up. The final big move to watch out for, and you really can't miss it, is Spectral Charge. This will conjure walls of spectral horses, which will run across the room in various directions. Make sure you avoid these, unlike I did here, to avoid a ton of damage. Midnight will enrage once Ataman is down, but it will be very easy from this point. Simply nuke the horse down, and pray to the RNG gods for the mount. The fifth boss is the Curator, who isn't skippable and will open a checkpoint upon death. He's very similar to the original Curator fight, though he's a lot less functional. This fight is all about ad management as well as managing the space in the room. Make sure you kill the volatile energy ads as soon as they pop up to avoid unnecessary damage and to focus more damage onto the boss. The Curator will cast Power Discharge every 12 seconds, which will spawn electric pools where players are standing at the time. Make sure to move as soon as the swirl appears underneath you to avoid taking too much damage. You want to stack the puddles fairly close together to avoid running out of room. After a minute, Curator will cast Evocation to regenerate its mana. This is the time you want to pop all cooldowns, as the boss will take 100% extra damage. Rinse and repeat if you didn't manage to get the boss down during Evocation, before heading through the checkpoint portal at the end of the room. The next boss in here, and the first boss of the upper tower, is Shade of Manade. This fight is based around interrupting particular abilities, and the biggest one to note is Piercing Missiles. This will deal a moderate amount of damage to the tank, as well as increasing damage taken by 25% for 20 seconds. The next interruptible ability is Frostbite, which will entomb the focused player in ice should it not be interrupted. Should it go off, simply run onto the ice block if you are the target of Manade's other cast, Inferno Bolt. This will melt the ice block and can resume the fight. Shade will also cast one of 3 random large abilities periodically. Here you can see the Flame Wreath ability, where players in the Wreath cannot move out of it and other players cannot move in, otherwise you'll basically wipe the group, as seen here also. Ceaseless Winter is another ultimate ability, and will fill the room with ice. Simply continue moving to avoid damaging debuffs stacking up, similar to Karazhan in the Nexus. The third and final big ability is Guardian's Image, which will spawn 3 ravens around the room and they'll constantly cast Arcane Bolt at players. Simply kill them down to get Manade to re-emerge. Continue with the interrupts and kill the boss down, before jumping off the ledge and being shrunk. Boss number 7 is Mana Devourer, a normally tinier creature who appears a hell of a lot larger due to his shorter statures. Every 30 seconds, the worm will cast Coalesce Power, which will shower the room in loose mana spheres. You want to intercept as many of these as manageable, as they will cause the boss to gain mana. Should the boss reach 100% mana, it's game over. It's also important to note that you'll gain an unstable mana debuff for each orb you soak, which deals 300,000 damage every 3 seconds and increases damage done by 5%, which stacks. To remove the debuffs, simply stand in an energy void puddle and wait for the stacks to remove. You can also pop a defensive cooldown such as Aspect of the Turtle to burst the orbs without gaining debuffs. And that's basically it. Rinse and repeat, avoiding AoE abilities that spawn to return to normal size. Which brings us to the final boss, Viz'aduum the Watcher. If you're a well-geared group, this should go fairly easily for you. However, when we first ran this on release night, we wiped for over an hour before getting him down. Burning Blast is the first move he'll cast, and he'll cast it fairly regularly. You can let the first one go off, but make sure to interrupt every second cast, otherwise the tank will begin taking more and more damage. Fell Beam will be cast on a random player, which will shoot a large green beam down at the target and spawn Fellfire patches. Simply move around to avoid taking any damage from this. The final Phase 1 ability is Bombardment, which will spawn green swirls on the ground indicating where missiles will be landing. Navigate your way around these to avoid taking the 750,000 damage hits. Phase 2 will begin at 66%, and Viz'aduum will open a demonic portal. Enter this to be teleported up to the first ship. The boss will already be casting Disintegrate when you come out of your bubble, so you will need to either move to the sides when heading towards him before it goes off, or use a defensive cooldown. Another ability to keep an eye out for in all phases is Disintegrate, which will focus on one player and shoot a large fell beam, which knocks players away and deals approximately 1 million damage. Make sure your group is spread out to avoid too many players getting hit by this. Chaotic Shadows is a debuff that, upon expiring, will unleash explosive shadow orbs from the affected player. Move away from these to avoid taking around 1 million damage. This debuff can also be dispelled should the afflicted player be in a good position to avoid splashing the group. All of the abilities from Phase 1 will continue here, and you'll really need to watch out for the disintegrate beams as they can knock you off the edge fairly easily. Chaotic shadows can also cause a fair bit of carnage here due to the confined space. At 30%, the boss will open another portal and enter phase 3. Upon reaching the next ship, you'll see the boss will be casting Stabilize Rift. Ignore this while you AoE the boss in the ads down, and interrupt it just before it goes off. Continue with the previous phase abilities as well as cleaving ads down, and your achievement will pop. Congratulations on clearing one of the most fun dungeons in a long time. I've also uploaded a Nightbane guide as well as a full uncut version of this run in my other videos. If you found this video helpful, feel free to hit the like button or subscribe if you'd like to keep up with loads more achievement guides coming soon. Thanks for watching.